foreign leaders believe they can walk all over him. They see him as a weak, incompetent leader who does not even have the support of his own party.
Yes.
Why won't he put the country first for a change, allow a carbon tax election so Canadians can have a prime minister who will protect this country?
The Liberal approach, Justin Trudeau's approach, is one of, don't worry, this will be okay. I am worried. It is not going to be okay unless we fight. What Trump is proposing is economic bullying. I've dealt with bullies. The only thing that bullies respect is strength. So let's show them that we are strong and ready to fight.
Turning back to our top story today, the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs and reaction to it here in Ottawa as well as across the country. While the Liberals have touted their Team Canada approach, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says Trudeau needs to stand up and fight back. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling the Prime Minister weak, and though premiers now say they're on the same page, they weren't all saying that heading into their meeting with the prime ministers. Amid mounting pressure to act, Trudeau traveled down to Florida Friday to have dinner with the incoming president, at Mar-a-Lago. Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk about that. Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. Scott Reid is former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin, and James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Good morning. Thanks for making the time for this. Scott, what's your first read on this meeting?
Well, I don't know how anybody could interpret it as anything other than positive. I mean, Trump governs by gut. So dinner is a pretty sensible strategy. And to be the first G7 leader to sit down with the president-elect, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And this is also how things are probably going to get done with Trump. Because, you know, when you look at how he conducts himself from Mar-a-Lago, with that, you know, peculiar cast of crew, over some burnt meatloaf and gold-gilded tableware, this is how we're going to make progress. And I think the fact that Trump, in his own usual incendiary language, at least called the dinner productive, all of that's a positive sign. Most important of all, it shows that the Prime Minister is taking initiative. You had a lot of critics saying, oh my God, where's the bold action? Well, bringing it down there is pretty bold action. And one person who was not present was the president of Mexico. And you can bet a burrito she was not happy about it.
James, what's your read on it?
All that's true, and I think it's more than just a relationship between the Prime Minister of Canada and the President of the United States. If you look at the people who are around that photo now that everybody's been analyzing, and I think beyond that, there are plenty of people who are within President Trump's orbit who I think over time, any one of whom could be extraordinarily influential and important. You look at the governor of North Dakota, who's going to become the Interior Secretary, Marco Rubio from Florida, who has a longstanding and informed view of Canada-U.S. relationships as being a big net positive for both countries. You look at even Elise Stefanik, who's a congresswoman from upstate New York, a border district with Canada, who's now going to be ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Designate Hoekstra from Michigan, who's going to be the U.S. ambassador to Canada. I can go on, but there's a list of people who are well-informed, very thoughtful, who historically have had a very strong net positive view of the Canada-U.S. relationship, all of whom are going to be worthy of dinners and engagement and conversations to ensure that they understand the importance of the North American platform for safety, security, and prosperity for both countries going forward.
It's interesting because now, I mean, for the months leading up to this, Kathleen, we weren't sure who the cast of characters necessarily would be, right? Because so many of them from the first administration had, you know, written books kind of decrying Trump. Now there's a real sense of, and you look around, as James points out, to that picture, like who the key players are going to be in our relationship, which must be some relief, at least to governments, both provincially and the federal government, about like who to pursue these relationships
For sure. And I think looking at, I mean, James did a great job of summarizing who's around the table and the influence there, but we got to admit that over the course of this past week, this is, you know, a feather in Trudeau's cap. You know, he not only gathered the premiers last Wednesday, he started a plan on what he would do for the border, a new technology and investments, and then capping the week off with this dinner with Trump in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, there was even some CanCon content played. Apparently, Leonard Cohen played through the music through the dinner hall last night. But I mean, I think that it has been a good week for Trudeau. But what can come in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, looking ahead, I mean, you mentioned the word progress. Scott, like, essentially, is this all going to boil down to whether or not Canada can escape those tariffs?
Well, to some degree, for sure. I mean, ultimately, it's about results. But, you know, for clues on what comes next and what our hope might be, I'd look again not to Trump's side of the table, but our side. I thought it was significant that he brought down Dominic LeBlanc, public security minister. Not only is Dom as charming as a Wayne sommelier, probably handy to have at that table, but he's in charge of our border. And I think when you try to figure out how do you want to navigate through this tough time, putting the agenda on the border probably works for Trudeau because he can take action there. We can put in export controls. We can add drones. We can add agents and resources. I think that makes a lot more sense. That's a better conversation and a better agenda than having, to play energy off auto or forestry, off of agriculture. So I think that's an indication of what we'll see next. Action on the part of Canada that allows Trump to say, see, I got a deal that no one else ever got. I got them to move in a way that Biden never could. And you know what? Let them have that. Let them have that full plate of meatloaf as long as we can then make progress on tariffs.
I was told, James, that it was very specific. In particular, Lutnick conveyed like the only way to escape these tariffs is more action on the border, and that Trump was very specific about technology not being a substitute for extra manpower or womanpower, whatever you want to call it, at the border. How significant do you think the border is going to be in moving through, navigating this administration?
Very important, and the improvement of our hard asset capacity along the border is something that we can do. It's something that this administration wants, and by the way, it's something that Canadians want as well. I think there's comfort in numbers. There's comfort in a sense of presence of security at our border that would be accretive to both Canada, the U.S., and Canadians' sense of security. The Canada Border Services Agency has 6,500 uniformed officers across this country, but the annual budget affords for up to 8,500. I think we might want to close that gap and hire those 2,000 extra officers in uniform and have some presence on the border. That's something that we can do. It's something we've budgeted for. It's something that Canadians want. You can increase technology. You can increase hard assets. You can add helicopters and drone technology. Do information sharing that would be, again, beneficial to both countries. Drugs going north and south, guns coming north from the United States. All positive things for Canada, all positive things for the relationship.
Kathleen, what are your thoughts on how they kind of navigate that issue?
Well, I think I'd go back to the fact that, first of all, when Trump announced the threat of the tariffs on Monday, it's not the same situation as it was in 2016. Like, that was about building up American domestic manufacturing capacity. This time he's externalizing, as James just said, around fentanyl and the border. And I think that we have to take it seriously. Obviously, Canadians, as James just said, want the border to be safe too, but we're not the same magnitude of threat as the southern border. So how I think the Trudeau government approaches this is going to be really careful because, first of all, tariffs in the first place will be inflationary on both sides. No one wants costs right now in America to go up or costs in Canada to go up. So one of the strategies would be like actually explaining to Americans what the threat of increased tariffs would be on regular products, on the cost of housing, on buying things at the home hardware store or whatever, And so I think that the premiers, in collaboration with the federal government, will come up with a plan with the next couple of weeks, and we'll see how they roll out.
Kathleen leads me to my last question for all of you, and I just have a few minutes, so unfortunately I have to be quick. Getting everyone on the same page. It's a different political situation domestically now than it was in 2016, Scott. How unified, quote unquote, do you expect, politicians of different political stripes at every level of government to be?
It's going to be an extremely difficult challenge because, as you say, Trump is stronger than he was in 2016, more emboldened, and Trudeau is weaker as a political prime minister, as a political actor. And so, trying to pull together that Team Canada approach, people keep saying that phrase, it almost sounds meaningless. What is the truth of it? The truth of it is that we're going to have an integrated strategy, because Kathleen's right. It'd be great to talk to Americans about how this is not in their self-interest, but Trump may resent that. So we're going to have to think that through. And if one premier dashes off and starts a campaign that's counterproductive, they're going to have to be brought to heel. That's the reality of it. The stakes are too high.
James, what do you think about that?
This is a very long 4 years of a president who knows he doesn't have to run for re-election and has the authority under his powers to do a lot of things that could be extraordinarily challenging and difficult for Canada. So for Canadians to work together, I think is going to be fundamentally important. If all of us put this, whether we're dealing with the tariffs now, the USMCA later, or random acts of unkindness from the President of the United States when he has a domestic audience that he needs to appeal to, the relationship and the long term and Canadians coming together will be fundamental for Canada's well-being.
Last 30 seconds to you, Kathleen.
Fundamentally, you've got to realize that Trump is externalizing his own threats. Like, he's worried himself about promises that he made to the U.S. electorate that he probably can't keep. This is dog whistling here. And so as long as you recognize it's not actually about bolstering American domestic capacity, it's actually about solving Trump's problems for him and, maybe soothing his ego, Canadians will be okay.
Oh, we'll just end on that positive note for once. Okay, thanks everybody. Our Sunday strategy session. Scott Reed, James Moore, and